how prescient do you think this misunderstanding of history is to public policy and even academic and now mainstream political discourse?
Well, by prescient, I think you mean influential. Prescient means foreseeing. So if you mean how influential, it was very influential, particularly in the 50s and 60s when this Marxian interpretation of British history was at its peak. And a good deal of government policy was based on this idea that, well, this idea has two advantages. Firstly, it suggests that you can easily remodel society because what we are now is very modern. We were community-based, feudal sort of people until, say, the 17th, 18th centuries. So we are now in a new world. We can forget that old world and we can move forward. So the Marxian message is one of empowering you to make big changes. So the world of Harold Wilson and the 1960s and into the 70s was very much dominated by that. And the welfare state and so on were all around this. When my book came out, it was very influential because it also, this kind of social movement towards a socialist society in Britain had moved to such an extent that in the 70s you got very great power of the trade unions, you had strikes, you had chaos. And Thatcher was a symptom and a reflection of a change of mood. And Thatcher herself was a fan of mine. That's to say, her advisor, particularly Sir Keith Joseph, got all his Treasury ministers to read my book. Her advisors like William Waldegrave and others were great fans of the book because they suggested two things. One was that all this was a new fashion introduced by Marxist thinkers, and that there was an older England which was much more individualistic and flexible and market-driven. So we could go back and look at that and appreciate it as well. So in the Thatcher era, this new version was quite influential, even in government. It's the one time I suppose my work has been influential. But I read all the stuff you're talking about as well. I'm a great fan of Noam Chomsky, and I read all his work, and not Che Guevara, but others of that thing. I mean, one likes to think that if one is exploring the world as a young person, one challenges all the current myths of and assumptions of the generation above one, and one should rebel against it. And at the time that you were thinking about it, and even I was thinking about it, the rebellion was against the establishment and hence favouring all that Marxist sort of stuff. But one interesting just footnote to this is that in the 60s and 70s, this was the sort of thing I was interested in, and my friends, the rebellion. Recently, I did an interview with someone who was also a fan and has been influenced by this. And in turn, this is by a long chain of circumstances possibly led to the Gaza ceasefire. But this person was someone called Jeff Sachs. And he told me that he'd read Origins and been deeply influenced by it. But he also, when I interviewed him at length, I asked him about the influence of Marxism when he was at university at Harvard in America in the 60s. And he said, absolutely not. No one ever taught me anything about Marx, and they just said it was rubbish. And so it was in England that this sort of Marxist interest came up. But in America, it was much more fringe for various reasons.